Hello, everybody. Welcome. You're not going to believe who's here with us right now in the flesh and off camera. We have the one and only Michael Thompson from, I keep saying Maritime Fun, Melbourne, Florida, and his wife, who is off camera, Diane, is a jam. Lexi's over there too. We invited them to be on camera, but they chose to let us do it.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if that's the wisest choice or not, but we'll do what we can with what we have. And we just spent 3 hours with these guys, and it went by like this, just talking about all things ministry and life and the past and experiences. And it was just a great time. And I think for us, it's just refreshing when you can really connect with people on that level. And it's good when time goes by and you don't even realize.
Yeah, well, for us too. I mean, being on the other end of the spectrum age-wise, it keeps us young to hear the reflections of people who are younger than us, and causes us to filter or receive our experiences through a different, different strainer. Because we see things differently. So it's really great for us. We love it.
Come on. So we have an encounter night tonight. We're gonna encounter the Lord. Mike and Diane are gonna minister. We got a leaders. I hate to call it a dinner because it's at 3:00. So we'll call it an early dinner, but just a time where we get to gather. And when you have people like Mike and Diane coming into town, you always want to get as much exposure as possible to the people in the region. That's how we feel in ministry and life, is how can we get a bigger impact and a bigger footprint when we bring people like these guys in. So thanks for coming in. Thanks for taking the time. Why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about you guys and where you're from and what's going on?
Well, we've been in this ministry my whole life. I was raised by a pastor, and we met in college. We're in professional ministry, full-time ministry for 20 years. And then I crashed and burned. I blew my life into a cliff and wound up leaving ministry for my profession, and I've been in the marketplace the last 23 years. And now I do this strange thing of straddling the fence from both experiences. But our connection a lot with you guys has come through, our connection in the leadership network. And that all started for us in 1995 when Randy Clark came to our church in Melbourne, Florida, and we started seeing God do some pretty incredible things, which led to 6 nights a week for 9 months, cross-denominational move of God in a region, and then also another year and a half we met every weekend. And so out of that, we kind of fell in love with all things kingdom. Having been raised in church, it kind of blew my whole church theology up, and I had to understand how big the kingdom is. So we're wanting in our final years, in our latter years, to ride the train with you guys, younger leaders that are coming up, and see what God has. In that move, there were a group of us pastors who were kind of working with Randy as leaders, and we were all 30-something pastors, and we didn't have spiritual fathers around. And I think part of what we missed and part of what we lost in that move of God in our region was we didn't have fathers around to help us understand how to navigate all of that stuff. And so Diane and I have a deep burden in our hearts to not let that happen. To people like you guys who are carrying storage, we want you to be able to look around and say, we had spiritual moms and dads around to help cheer us on, but also protect us and show us and walk with us and bounce ideas off. So that's what we do now. We go hang around with younger people and act like old people and see what we can do in the kingdom.
Act like young old people, if I know anything about you guys. And you got kids, grandkids?
Oh, we got 3 grown children and 10 grandchildren.
10 grandkids, come on, that's the goal.
And we love it.
Yeah, I imagine that. And the network you're talking about, what you referred to as the Bethel Leaders Network, which, it's been so life-giving and so powerful anytime we can connect. And that's, we met at Dave's house, and I think we hit it right off the bat. We sat at the picnic table and just talked multi-generational revival and a little bit of your story with Melbourne. And
then we sat through your session, and I squalled through the whole thing. sobbing because it's like finally somebody on that end of the spectrum sees what's on their heart and this connection between generations. I want to see a generation actually give something living to the next generation.
Right on. And we were just out at Beth a couple of weeks ago and bounced around the idea of doing some Zoom calls regarding multi-generational or some conversations that need to be had. And Diane just mentioned before we started this that we need to start having this conversation.
For sure.
And like, how do we really steward this well and allow it to benefit us in moving forward in the things of the Lord in a multi-generation revival, and instead of limiting us what we don't have it. And that's why I love your guys' heart, because you want to be the benefit to the next generation or those that are young and in leadership or in the faith to go strong and go farther. And I told Lexi this, and I joke about it, but I'm a bit serious. I said, I want to be buried vertically. First of all, I think it's economical. I mean, I think we could get more space. Yeah, exactly. And then I want the plaque to say that I'm buried vertically so that the next generation can stand on my shoulders. It's the last final prophetic demonstration of the next generation benefiting from us. And I think you guys have the same heart.
I believe it's God's picture, and I don't think he's seen it. You know, historically, I was born into a Pentecostal preacher's home, but I came along kind of at the downswing of the classical Pentecostal movement. And then I went to work at one point for Jamie Buckingham, who was one of the fathers of the charismatic movement, where the work of the Holy Spirit was, outside of the bonds of classical Pentecostalism, and Catholics and Lutherans and Presbyterians, all kinds of people were receiving the Holy Spirit. But I also kind of came in on the tail end of that. So for me, I've lived through two waves where I got on my surfboard just as the wave was dying.
Yeah.
And then in mid-90s, when the Toronto blessing happened and there were revival centers around the country, I got to be part of that.
Come on.
And I don't want my kids to get on their surfboards just as our move of God is dying.
Yes.
So in my heart, there's this deep desire that there be some fathers and mothers around who still have fire, who still believe that God will move, can move, is moving, and who can not only tell you about what was, but are part of what is. It's that picture Jesus had of the guy pulling treasures out, old and new.
Yeah.
That's who we want to be.
And pouring into what's to be or what's coming. I think that vision is so beautiful as well. What was, what currently is, and what can I do in my life to benefit what's coming for a generation we'll never see potentially. And I think we've lost that a little bit. I was having some conversations recently about just how we build, even in the natural, in the West. You go east and there's castles and monuments and these edifices that took hundreds of years to build and now are still standing here generations later. And for us, we slapped together some wood and throw up a house, and we got a house park, and we got a community, and it's not necessarily with longevity in mind. And so for us, how do we change our mindset to move from the quick now thing into a generational mindset to where potentially we may never even see the true impact of what we're doing.
I agree, and I think it's so deeply in the heart of God. Zechariah chapter 8 is this beautiful picture, and God prophesies, I'm going to come back to Jerusalem. I'm going to set my presence down. And he says all these things about what he's going to do, and then he describes what it's going to look like in the city. And he said there'll be old men sitting in their chairs with their cane because of their age in the streets, and the children will be playing around them.
Yeah, come on.
And to me, that's the picture. It's that God has built something where the generations aren't like acting sequentially. They're acting together simultaneously in the presence of God.
Yeah, come on.
And that picture haunts me. I want to be that old guy in a cane with the little kids playing around with feet.
Right on. That's so good. And just for everybody watching, we didn't really have a plan for this. We're just like, hey, let's sit down and talk about this, because I think we both burn with this message and this revelation and the truth. And so on some level, we don't need a script. We don't need questions to prompt. We could talk about this potentially
For sure.
for hours and days. But I do want to touch on, just shared a message this last weekend, and just talking about the generational piece, and when Jesus said, "I'm not going to leave you as orphans." Tell us a little bit about that message, and just like how that's burning in you even right now, and the revelation you got regarding that multi-generational piece.
When we were out at Bethel, I knew I was going to be talking about it in our home church when we flew back.
And the title is great, Legacy or
Yeah.
Leftovers.
Yeah, because the idea is Jesus said, "I will not leave you as orphans." So he was saying, I want to make sure that I leave you a legacy. And he said things like, my peace is I'm going to leave with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you this so that it's my joy, but your joy will be full because you have mine. I'm going to leave you my word, which lasts forever. So he's given him all these pieces of his legacy because he knows they have to have that to sustain and move in what they're doing. And we have a choice, as in my generation. In generations before me, they had a choice. We can either leave leftovers, which is basically what's left of what we used up in the move of God, or we can leave legacy.
Yeah.
Those are the choices. And legacy is about giving something living when I'm gone, something that's bigger than I am.
Yeah.
Leftovers is just, well, here's what I learned. Go do something with it. There's no momentum in it.
Right on.
There's no continuation in it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like we're in a relay and we're handing you something at a pace where you can grab it and run even faster than the next generation.
Yeah.
It's inheritance. It's not legacy.
Yeah.
And inheritance is great,
right?
But legacy is better.
Absolutely.
And so for me, that whole idea of I don't want to leave my children spiritually or physically as orphans.
Yeah.
Leftovers are for orphans.
Yeah.
Legacy is for sons.
Come on.
And so
good.
If I just leave leftover, it's just, you have to sift through it. Like I dump something on the table and you sift through it and pick out the good stuff.
Right.
When I'm giving you a legacy, I'm giving you something you could spend in your generation.
Right on.
It's already put together for you. And I always think back about Caleb, when Caleb and Joshua were standing ready to go in, all of their generation gone because they hadn't believed.
Yeah.
And here are the two believers standing there. When Caleb asked for the mountain, he said, "Give me the mountains." He wasn't as interested in the mountains as he was the giants.
Yeah, come on.
Because,
hill country.
Yeah. He said, "I want the mountains where the giants live." Because you see, I've lived long enough to know God can handle those giants.
That's right.
This young generation behind me, they haven't seen you do the things I've seen you do, God.
on.
So give me the mountains. I'll clear the giants from the land. And that way these guys can come in and take the land, this next generation.
That's so good.
And for me, I want to be that kind of guy. I want to be taking out giants so that your generation can go farther, faster, longer than we ever dreamed about.
Come on. It's so good. I think even this a burn with that story, because he says, "Give me the hill country where the Nephilim are and the fortified cities." It was walled cities and giants. And he could have easily went and just said, "Give me the low country where things are easy and there's not a big demand." But I think that in your generation, and you can speak to this even, that you saw something at 40. Caleb said, I'm 85 years old now, and I'm as strong as I am as I was at 40 for war and for coming and going. And I feel like he saw something at 40 years old. He saw potential. He saw possibility. He saw the giants, and he didn't look at himself as grasshoppers. He saw them as grasshoppers because of the word of the Lord, because of the promise. And I feel like in your generation, there is this element that we saw this back then. We saw this in the Jesus people. We saw what was possible. And now here we are, 45 years later, and I still believe in my heart that God's going to do it. I'm going to see it in my life, whether it's getting the hill country for the younger generation, or speak to some of those things that you guys have experienced and seen that you're still contending for after such a long time to see it happen in our day in this multi-generational move of God.
Joel promised, and it was the prophecy that Peter picked up on Acts 2, that God would pour his spirit out on all flesh, and sons and daughters will prophesy. But he said this, he said, your young men will see visions, your old men will dream dreams. That's always sounded backwards to me. because vision is about seeing what can happen immediately. It's not there, but you can see it
So good.
and you can go after it.
Yeah.
But dreams are long term.
Right.
Dreams are big. So why wouldn't the young men who have a lot of time be the ones dreaming dreams?
Mm.
And the old men who just have a little time see the visions and go after the visions?
Yeah.
And I think it's because of what you're talking about. I think the old men can dream at a level that I don't have to feel the responsibility to see this happen. So I can dream bigger. I can have ideas that are generations long. They're way out, because I know I'm pressing up against the end of this thing.
Yeah.
So I don't have to be limited by what can be accomplished in my lifetime.
That's so good.
I can see stuff that's way bigger because I know I'm never going to see it.
Yeah.
But my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, they can see it. So I want to paint a picture, a vision,
Yeah.
a dream that's big enough.
Come on.
And then you guys go in there and you build the visions that accomplish that dream, the piece at a time. So if I become the kind of person who dreams as an old man,
Yeah.
you can become the kind of person who sees his visions accomplished
Right on.
in his lifetime. I'll never live to see them,
Yeah.
but that's okay because I'll be part of the cloud cheering you on
Come on.
while you're accomplishing the things that I only dreamed about.
Yeah.
And so for
So
me,
good. So good.
I look back to the mid 90s and we saw some things. Yeah, they were incredible. I mean, the first 7 days of the renewal in Melbourne were things I'd only dreamed about as a kid. I never thought I would see stuff like
Come on.
that. Randy Clark will say that the first 2 weeks in Melbourne and then the third week of that same year, when he went to Charlotte, those were the 3 weeks that released the healing anointing that has taken him around the world for now 25, 30 years.
Wow.
And what we saw in those first 2 weeks, I still sometimes scratch my head and say, was that real?
Yeah.
I mean, we saw our building so full that we had to hang, we didn't have this technology we have now. We had to hang a sheet on the front of our building and put a projector out there and had hundreds of people.
That's your overflow.
That was our overflow because we didn't have anything else, you know? And so I saw across denominations, Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, Episcopalian, and I mean, not just the people, the pastors were there, were part of it. I never dreamed I'd see that.
Yeah.
So we saw this thing, but we didn't know how to shepherd. We didn't know how to steward it. We didn't have the fathers around to help us carry it. So it came as a wave and it went.
Yeah.
But I saw things there that I still want to see the reality of.
Yeah.
I want to see the fulfillment of.
Right.
I want to see your generation see it, but see it to the end, see it to the outcome. Whatever it was Jesus was planting in us as an idea, as a dream, as a hope, I want it to become a reality for you guys. It's like we talk about in our movement, renewal under revival, under reformation, under renaissance. I want to see something besides that renewal. I want to see revival that shifts culture, and I want to see culture begin then to experience reformation, where things change and begin to align with the kingdom.
Come on.
But yeah, I saw things that my dad only dreamed of.
Yeah.
But now they've become my dreams. And I only saw part. I only saw the beginning. I want to see the end. It's interesting in our county there are several of us left that were there in the mid 90s. We were part of that leadership. Now we're the old guys.
Yeah.
And we say to each other all the time, we don't want the next generation of leaders in our county to be fatherless.
Come on.
But we also want to be around to see it.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it was like for Caleb when he stuck his toes in the soil of the land he believed they could take 40 years earlier. And he got to be one of two guys that got to be there and take the land.
Yeah.
And I always had these vivid imaginations of what it was like when he hit the hill country with a sword in his hand, chasing some giant, some Anakim, and saying, I was going to take you 40 years ago. Guess what? I'm back.
This has been in my heart this whole time.
Yeah.
I think the same way. And I think, there's things that for those in your generation, and even more than that, who have tasted those things and seen those things and been a part of those things, and now you're starting to taste it again, and you're starting to see it again. You're stepping on the soil of the promised land, like Caleb. You're starting to see the what was now become a reality once again. I think there is that almost a revival in yourself. Like, remember this. There's more than even a nostalgia. There's a familiarity to how God is moving in our day, and beyond what the news says and society and culture says. God is on the move in significant and mighty ways, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that that's actually happening in our day, in our generation. And I would love for you to just share, just a couple of things you said. Uh, the elder going outside of the city and with his staff, and the kids coming, and then even Joshua and Caleb stepping into that place. I think it's imperative that we raise up sons and daughters. I think it's imperative that we see ourselves on some level, even myself at 40 years old. Now it's my role to raise up sons and daughters, and my wife, a little younger than me, I won't say her age, it's just for safety purposes. As a mother in the faith, we sing the song, Father Abraham had many sons, and we don't go on to read that mother, that Sarah would be a mother to nations, and that kings would come from her. And so for us, it's really imperative to raise up sons and daughters. And you look at Joshua and Caleb, and they entered that land, and we read, and I shared this when I was out at Bethel and I was speaking at the launch track. There's in Judges 2, there's in my opinion, one of the most heart-wrenching verses in the Bible that says, after Joshua and Caleb died and that whole generation went to be with the Lord, that there arose a generation after Joshua who did not know God or his ways. And you don't see Joshua raising up a young man like he was with Moses, speaking to the truth that we need to be raising up sons and daughters.
I think one of the biggest pictures for me is back to Caleb. Caleb went into the land with his children.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is Caleb had daughters.
Oh, come on.
So Caleb led into the land his daughters, who came to him later and demanded the land. They said, all the guys that we grew up with, all the boys we played ball with, they all got land. But what about us, Dad? Right. And he said, you're right, you need to get land. So not only did Caleb lead his family in, the next generation, but he let his daughters in, and they got to take land.
Yeah, come on.
And so for me, if I take my land and my sons and my daughter don't get theirs, I have failed in the quest.
Come on.
So I remember one day my middle son, Caleb, who's real involved in the same church we are, and he's a firebrand. I remember him looking at me one day and welling up with tears, and he looked at me intensely and said, Dad, when do I get my revival? Wow. And what he was saying is, my generation deserves its own move of God. Yeah. And part of that is we who saw the move of God have to tell you the stories of what we saw, not nostalgically, right, but prophetically.
Come on, that's such a good word.
It's so different to say, oh, this is how it was.
You should have been there.
You should have been there, exactly. Yeah. And if I say it like that, Caleb will grab me by the throat and shake my head. I wanted to be there. But it's more, we saw this, you can see this too. Yeah. So here's the embers we have left. Here's what we learned. Here's the living word that we learned. Yeah. Here it is. It's still on fire. Yeah. There's still coals here. Yeah. It's not burning quite at the level it was then, but there's still fire here. If I can give them living testimony, come on, then they can plant that in their land, and it can blossom into fire again. So for me, if my children and my grandchildren do not receive from me something that's alive, legacy, then all I'm giving them is leftovers. Right on. And as far as I'm concerned, they can go out and get fresh meat, and it'll be better than the leftovers I leave them. Right on. So I need to give them legacy. I need to give them something alive. Yeah. There was a church father who once said, the difference between traditionalism and tradition is that traditionalism is giving the next generation the dead faith of the living. Yeah. Tradition is giving them the living faith of the dead. Yeah. And there's a huge difference in that. Come on. I don't want to talk nostalgically
Yeah.
about renewal. Sometimes Diane will say to me, stop telling those stories because of 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Give them something new. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Because as the redeemed of the Lord, I have to tell the story.
Right on.
So we have to tell the story, but we can't tell the story nostalgic,
Right.
looking back and saying, oh, wasn't it great?
Yeah.
We have to tell the story prophetically, saying, look, this was the fire and I still got a torch.
That's right.
I can't bring you the whole fire, but I still got a torch here.
Yeah. Come on.
Light a fire with it. Light a fire with it. God, what God did then, God can do now. He can do in the next generation. He could do for my grandchildren. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that my children go into the land with me. Yeah. Not just my son, right, but like Caleb, my daughters. Come on. That the daughters would step in and own land. Yeah. And if there's any sign of revival, it's that the next generation, the sons and daughters prophesy. Come on. The young men, the young women carry the message and carry the fire.
That's so good. I don't know who it's original to, but I once heard that legacy isn't what you leave for somebody, it's what you leave in somebody. Yeah. And so you're talking about this passion and this fire and this vision, and maybe that goes back to the Joel 2 thing, that it is possible in my day, that this is what God has purpose and planned for my generation. It's not for days gone by or a select sovereign move, but out of my hunger and out of the vision that I've got from my fathers and mothers, that it's possible to bring a move of God like this into my day and see that revival happen, into that reformation in society. And I would say, if not now, then when?
Well, if there's ever been a generation that had the potential of that, it's the generation you and I represent, the fathers and sons in our generations, because we have seen a move. Yeah. And we have a hungry sonship, daughtership. That's saying, this is the first time I've ever remembered where a generation, your generation, is turning around, looking at us and saying, give me something. Yeah. I want to go. And so we have a Timothy generation reaching back to the Pauls. Come on. Saying, give us this. Yeah. But they're also got their eyes toward the next generation that they're raising up. And they're saying, not give me this for my generation, give me this so that I have something to give the next generation. So good. So there's a continuity of revival potentially that I've never seen in 65 years. Right on. So what I'm saying to the people I talk to is, let's don't drop this ball. Yeah. I don't want to drop it passing it to you, and I don't want you to stop and say, oh, I've got this. For us. I want you to be turning at the moment you get it, looking at the next generation, so that the fire, I might only have a torch left. Yeah. You'll have a fire. Yeah. Come on. And we don't want you to let it burn down to a torch and hand the torch to the next generation. We want you to hand them living fire so they can create a firestorm. Amen. Amen. And we've had conversations about this, but I look at the imagery of the baton race, and where at one point the baton is being passed and the next runner is reaching back to grab it and he drops it. What happens in a baton race is that that next runner is actually looking forward. That's right. He's no longer trained to look back and try to get it. He trusts the person behind him to put it firmly in his hands, and they run together for a period of time, all while that next runner is looking to what's in front of him. And I think that there's something happening in this generation and in these relationships where we're trusting the mothers and fathers in our midst to hand us what we need while looking ahead to what's next, to the next runner, to the next generation, to those who are waiting for us to receive what we are getting and what we have to be able to run their race. I think it's just a beautiful picture of what God intends to do in this generation, in this move, is that we have mothers and fathers who are equipped and ready to put that firmly in our hand and see us run further than they did, while we're looking ahead to what God has for us. And we're our hand fixed back here, holding on to this generation while looking ahead to the next generation. And it's that beautiful pattern of a multi-generational move of God, where we can continue doing that as long as we position ourselves correctly. And I'm not talking titles and roles. No. I'm talking about our heart. Well, it's such a great image, because as a leg runner. I don't get to the next thing and stop.
Yeah.
And then go hang the baton up in my office.
Come on.
I ran my leg.
Yeah.
I have to keep running at my top pace.
Yep.
And it's my responsibility to slap this in your
That's right.
hand
Yeah.
while you're picking up your pace.
Yep.
And when you have the baton, I have to let go of that, let you run at a new pace, and I become the cheerleader for the next leg.
That's so good. And we talked briefly about this too, but that, that person is still part of the team. Just because that leg of the race, that part of their race is over, they're still a vital part.
And they're hoping you run your leg faster than they ran theirs. And that maybe the next guy down there runs his leg faster than you run yours, because that's how we win.
That's right. That's right. So we could talk about this really all day. And I know our wives are, I don't think they're sick of hearing about it, but
They might be.
They might be just a little bit, but I'm honored. It's cool. We have here at Destiny Church, we got Ron and Connie Marquette, and their moms and dads are BLM builders, and to have you guys here, I just feel like, those in the Bethel Leaders Network, I just think there's a code word. Builders is really a code word for moms and dads.
It's all it is.
It really is. And if I've discovered anything in the past 3 years, it's that. And so we just feel so blessed and so rich to have guys like you and Ron and Connie and the other builders in our movement, but also those that are looking to sons and daughters to say, we want you to run faster and we want to give you what we've received freely and to see you do what God's called you to do.
We really feel like the legacy is about creating something that when you take it, it gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And then that legacy is passed to the next generation. It gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
That's the picture. That's the image. This thing should be a river that's expanding and getting bigger, kind of like the headwaters up here in northern Minnesota that become the mighty Mississippi.
Right.
It shouldn't be in your generation the same size river.
Yeah.
And in the next generation, it shouldn't be the same size river. It should be more water. There should be more width. There should be more power to the flow. And if we could see that happen, if I could see it in my life happen in one generation, it would be the first time I've seen it.
Come on.
And I think this is the season. This is the moment. This is the cultural requirement. If we're going to see absolute change in our world, it's going to require this, because it's not going to happen in one generation. But we can't keep starting over every generation.
So good. So good. So our time's up. But we'd love to chat about it more, and you'll hear more from us. Like I said, we got Ron and Connie in the house here. We'll bend their arm to get them in. Rod just walked in the room. So just hearing more from the moms and dads that are surrounding us, and just, I think one thing that's a burden on my heart is not to let these stories fall to the ground and never steward those experiences and those moments you guys have had with the Lord that we weren't, like your son. I wanted to be there. And I think we could live on through them with hearing the stories and knowing how God has moved and make it prophetically possible for him to do it in our day. And if you guys are interested, we talked about like a multi-generational Zoom call or something. Put in the comments if that's something that interests you. We'd love to put something together and start having that conversation. But